Good evening and welcome into the Pacers Podcast Show. I'm Kyle Newman, your host.
And I'm Rhett Hensley, your co-host.
We have a great lineup for the next hour. We will discuss the Pacers' latest offseason news, answer the question, who is the Pacers' biggest rival now, talk about if we think Indiana will get back to the top of the East next year, and discuss the top 5 most memorable Pacers game finishes. Rhett, 11th Pacers Podcast Show. It's great to have you back. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Can you believe it?
No, I'm excited. 11th Pacers show. It's great.
Unbelievable. Wow, pretty soon we'll be at 100. This is great news. All right. Well, Rhett, let's get right into it. Pacers off-season. It's been interesting. Before we get into that, though, I want to bring this up to you because this is what we talked about a little bit on last week's show, and I found something on it. Adam Silver talked about the playoff format change, saying that it could come but no earlier than 2016 and 2017. So that's just 2 years from now, but this would be the playoff format that you were talking about, where it would be a top 16 team format into the playoffs, 16 best. What do you think, Rhett, if this happens?
I hate to say when I'm right, but I was, and I think it's a great idea. You'll be able to play different teams more often. Like we'd get to see Golden State, maybe see Kobe a little bit more if he stays around. I like the change. Seeing those different types of teams more often is something that is going to be good.
So you think that will be good? The
I
top
think it will.
16 teams, of the best.
The top teams that are playing the hardest deserve the spots. It's just, that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. Well, I found that interesting, and I guess we will see a couple of years from now. I think that stemmed from the playoffs this year. It's more of what the hack-a-Shaq rule. He's thinking about these things as commissioner of what he wants to change. Maybe he's been wanting this for a little while, and now that he's in control and power, he has the authority to discuss this. I guess we will see, but I thought I would throw that out there. Rhett, the Pacers offseason, the draft is approaching quickly, but still the biggest headline with this team is going to be what happens with Roy Hibbert. And what I wanted to ask you...
we wheel him out in the trash can.
I know, and we both have been on that, agreed with that, and we've been on the same page with that. Before we get into talking about what could happen there with the trade, the pickup scenario, let's look at what Bird's comments recently have been on Roy Hibbert. He said, "We assume he's going to be back, and if he comes back, we're probably going to play another style, and I can't guarantee him anything. He's going to have to earn it. I was talking to Coach earlier. We'd like to play a little faster tempo, and that means we've got to run a little faster, maybe at times play a little smaller. We just got into it, so I don't know what style, but we'd like to change it a little bit. But I would like to score more points, and to do that, you've got to run." Rhett, what do you think about those comments? To me, that's a shot at Mr. Hibbert right there, basically saying, all right, we understand that you're probably going to choose to be back because of the money, but don't think that you're going to sit here and play certainly as much as you did because you stunk last year. What do you think of those comments? What do you take out of that?
Well, if I was him, I would say, I would think, well, almost $16 million, I have no problem sitting on the bench. But for the Indiana Pacers standpoint, that's a loss of money, and I agree that they need to go smaller because of the fact that we need to score more points, push the ball, get down there. Roy Hibbert's getting down there at the end of the play. I mean, he's slow, he's not good, and even in his defense, it's went down. So you know, I think that his comments were a great shot at him. You know, it's basically saying if you're back, you're not playing. But really, if I was Roy Hibbert, I'd say, well, sit on the bench for $16 million. No problem.
Or maybe
no
it'll
problem
motivate.
there.
Maybe it'll motivate Roy Hibbert to prove everyone wrong. And
Well, it is in his contract year, so he probably wants to play as good as he can. I mean, we did see that when we first signed him, when his contract was up a few years ago, and that year that he did play great.
yes, he did, and he's a great defender. But the offensive production's an issue, and even defensively, I think he's declined this year from what he's been known to do and that force in the paint and blocking shots, and maybe it has to do with him being slow. Maybe he needs to just get stronger, because we see guards out there pushing him around. And
the funny thing is, I was looking at a video. I was right before the show. I was watching a video, Warriors versus Pacers, and I believe this was last year. Roy Hibbert got into it with David Lee, and then you see little Stephen Curry come in, and he basically picked him up and just tossed him twice.
I know, and he's not.
And
he's not
where
much,
is that?
He doesn't have much more meat on his bones than you. I mean,
I know.
It's very true, and Vogel kind of echoed what Bird said, and he said this: we'll have to see how it all plays out and what the roster ultimately looks like. But there's a possibility that Roy's role will be diminished if we're trying to play faster and trying to play smaller, but a lot of stuff is going to happen this summer. We'll see how the roster shapes out coming into next season. Those comments, to me, really smells, okay, I want Roy Hibbert out of here. When he's talking about a lot of stuff's going to happen this summer, and now the summer's here, off-season's here, that sure sounds like, Rhett, that we're going to try and pick up a piece to replace Hibbert. Even if Hibbert decides to stay, he won't be playing as a starter. What do you think about Vogel's comments there?
I don't know if he stays, and I think that they will end up trading him because he is not as big of a liability to any other team. If they sign him for a long amount of time, it's going to be worth the risk for them. So I think that, if he does stay, there's a possibility of him getting traded out of there not too far into the season.
Right, and it would be very interesting, and I'm going to, in a second, talk about those trade scenarios. But it is worth mentioning that the Pacers were in this situation with Hibbert last summer when they were trying to shop him. And here is what was said about them doing so again. It was a report by Sean Devaney. The Pacers did their due diligence on shopping Hibbert last summer, but found no takers, predictably. He had an only slightly better season this year, but the Pacers have some advantages this time around if they do shop him again. Most notably, Hibbert has only 1 year left on his contract, so making a deal for him would be a low-risk gamble for a suitor, even if it is expensive in the short term. That could have a double impact because Hibbert also figures to put forth a special effort in a contract year. There's also the notion that Hibbert has worn out his welcome in Indiana and would benefit from a change of scenery. So, Rhett, what do you think about that? It kind of echoes with what we were saying about, well, maybe he would be motivated to play, but what do you think there?
Well, I think he has worn out his welcome in Indiana. First of all, at the end of the season, they were booing him. So
yeah, that's kind of an indicator.
Yeah, so I don't know if he wants to even be back with that. I mean, it's just not. I don't think it would be good for his contract year with him.
What's interesting, the problem is there's not a lot of great trade scenarios with him. As he was stating, because of his low production, teams don't want him. They've seen that he hasn't been able to improve. So the Pacers are in a tough situation with that, especially with all of the notable free agents out there that we've discussed before, the Jamarcus Aldridges of the world and the Marcus Sauls, and there's plenty of big men. Kevin Love. I mean, options that are there. Even Greg Monroe. There's cheaper options down the line in the top 20 of free agents. But let me throw this at you. Bleacher Report came out with a few trade scenarios. I want to see what you think about these. I don't necessarily like them, but I'll see what you think. Trade number 1. Indiana Pacers receive Eric Gordon or Tyreek Evans. The Pelicans receive Roy Hibbert. What do you think about that?
Well, this one, I was on Bleacher Report reading these, and so far, that was the best one I saw in my mind. But, Eric Gordon does get injured quite a bit. It's kind of a risk, but then picking up Roy Hibbert, that's a risk. But
the issue I have with it is that Indiana doesn't get a big man.
Yeah.
They don't need guards.
Yeah, exactly. But, in the playoffs this year, Eric Gordon, he was lighting them up.
He was.
So he was playing good. But the thing is, Indiana doesn't need another shooting guard.
Exactly.
But you can continue on to the next one.
Yes, I will. Number 2, Indiana Pacers receive O.J. Mayo, Tyler Ennis. The Bucks receive Roy Hibbert.
Awful.
I agree. Kind of similar to the situation before. Guards, we don't need them. Tyler Ennis,
O.J. Mayo.
young. O.J. Mayo, inconsistent
Washed.
and down. He's at the bottom of his career and just hasn't proven to be able to be consistently productive and stay healthy, etc. So I agree. I think that's a terrible trade scenario. Number 3, Pacers receive Aaron Aflalo, Chris Kaman. The Blazers receive Roy Hibbert.
I don't like that either.
Why?
Because another shooting guard and Chris Kaman, I've never liked Chris Kaman. I don't think he's a good player, and I don't think he'd fit in well with Indiana Pacers.
I agree, and I think he's getting really old, and the production's down again.
You saw him when he played for Lakers a few years ago.
Exactly, and that's the issue that Indiana is in this offseason with Roy Hibbert. Nobody wants him, and if they do, they're going to give Indiana what they don't want necessarily.
Yeah, they're going to give him a gummy bear and lint.
Exactly. So it makes it a tough situation in general because if he ends up staying, he's just going to steal cap room from the Pacers.
To be honest.
Not going to play as much, and that's going to affect what Indiana can do with picking up other free agents, not to mention where will the draft picks fit into this team. So what were you going to say?
Well, I think that, if they can do anything, I think that they should try and trade him up for like a later pick in the draft or something. I mean, not a second rounder, but try and at least look for a first round draft pick late in the draft. I think that would, Pacers could pick up somebody with the 11th pick for a big man and then have an option for a point guard like they're needing. So, I think that there's many options out there other than just trading for a player.
Right. I agree with that. I agree. And so I guess we'll see what happens, but it seems like every week something's being updated here with Roy Hibbert in this situation. And again, free agency, the draft approaching, a lot of things could be changing soon for the Indiana Pacers. Before we close out this segment, Rhett, I want to mention one more player. The little third stringer that could is how the article by Jalen Bishop puts
Donald
it.
Sloan.
Donald Sloan, who the Pacers could keep for cheap. What do you think about Donald Sloan and keeping him? I think he proved himself and is a good backup. What do you think?
Exactly. I think that he needs to be moved into the backup spot. He is, like I said, a few shows ago, he is one of my favorite players on the Pacers, and my favorite players just aren't who is the best on the team and stuff like that. It's who I feel like I like and who I feel like that can actually come out and perform, not just at like an elite level, but come out there and do what they're supposed to do. He comes in there and does what he's supposed to do and a little more.
He does, and he's cheap, and he was injured a lot of this year. But when he was not injured, when he filled in for George Hill, he was very productive. And just listen to some of these stats. Averaged almost 4 assists per game, almost 9 points per game, 77% free throw shooter. He had 21 starts in 53 games, so that just goes to show how much he was injured. And when George Hill came back, he didn't play as much. But he had 31 on November 5th against Washington. This guy can score. I think that Indiana should look to keep him come this next season.
I believe he's like 26, and he's got room to grow.
He does
and get better, and I believe that he can grow and get better.
I agree. I think he can come off the bench and be very productive, much like a DJ Augustine was in the past for the Pacers. So I think Indiana would benefit from keeping him. All right, well, let's get into this next segment here, Rhett. Who do you think is the Pacers' biggest rival now? We have to answer this. It's kind of a tough one. I'm interested to see what you think. Is it still the Heat?
Start this one out.
Is it still the Heat? Is it the Bulls? Is it the Knicks? The Cavs? The Pistons? Let me tell you what I think. I think it is still the Miami Heat. Here's why.
Interesting.
I hate them. No, the reason is because they still have Dwayne Wade. They still have Chris Bosh. He'll be back. There's players on that team. Chris Anderson. There are still plenty of players. Udonis Haslem. Players on that team that were still part of that core when LeBron was on that team and that rivalry. Now, granted, it's not the same without LeBron, but I still think that rivalry was established from the 4 years that LeBron was there. I think that we've talked about this before. Every time that we see a Pacers Heat game, it's always about sold out. The crowd's the loudest, as it usually is in that matchup. They're always chanting "Beat the Heat." They hate them. You're constantly hearing that. There's always fights. I mean, I just think that was established, and I really like that rivalry, and that is my number one rivalry still for the Pacers. And I think that you'll see it again with the Heat with Bosh back healthy. They'll be a decent team in the East again. I'm still going to love seeing that series, and I'm still going to love chanting "Beat the Heat." It's a great thing, Rhett. That is what I think. Now here's what I will preface it with. I'll give the Heat the number one as still the biggest rival. Now, I do think the Bulls are still a big rival to the Pacers, and I would put them probably at number two because the Bulls, again, much like the Heat games, the Bulls games always draw about sold-out crowds. The Pacers and Bulls have always been a big rival, and I think that is still there. I think that the fans, they get into it with each other. They can't stand it. There's been some history in the playoffs. It dates all the way back to Michael Jordan, which we'll get to later. And so I think that the Bulls are number two, but I want to read this to you, Rhett. This is what Derrick Rose had to say a couple years ago about the Pacers and that rivalry. Derrick Rose thinks that it's no longer a rivalry with Indiana. He says that he believes the Bulls have only one main rival, and it's the Miami Heat. He acknowledged that Indiana is a great team, and despite of the recent success they've had, this is what he said. He said it's a thing of the past with the Pacers, dating back to the Michael Jordan days. He says, people say that it's a rivalry, but I don't really see it. I say the team that is more like a rivalry is when Darren Collison was on the team. That was more like a rivalry, but this team is a great team. They've already proven themselves when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. If anything, in a year or two, it could be a rival, but now people say it's a rival and I don't see it. So this was a couple years ago. I'd be curious if he thinks now that it is or not. I thought those comments were interesting. What do you think about his comments there? And I guess that'll segue into you. I'll continue on with a couple other of those teams and where they rank up there as rivals still, but let's transition. You respond to that comment by Derrick Rose, and you give me your top rival.
Well, I completely agree with him on this one.
Wow.
But I feel like
you don't
I feel
think
like
the Bulls
I feel like the
are a
team does not feel like it's a rival. The fans still do,
What do you feel
not the
like?
team.
That's
Not
what
the
I'm
team.
asking.
Well, from my experience of going to the games, I've had many times trash talking Chicago Bulls fans. I mean, me and you, we've been to a Chicago Bulls game, not just in Indianapolis, but at Chicago. And, I think for the fans, it's more of a rival, not for the actual team. I think that the fans love getting into it with each other, but on the standpoint of it actually being a rivalry between the players on the court, I don't think so much as of now. But, with Derrick Rose coming back, it's going to add more competition. It's going to get things heated up, I believe. And, it could end up transitioning into the rival again. But my number one Pacers rivalry is blank.
Blank. That's
It's
what you
blank.
have for me. It's blank.
It's
What does
blank.
that mean?
I think that
They don't
I
have
think
a
that-
rivalry? Every team has a rivalry. What
No,
are you
I think
talking about?
that there is, as of now, there is nothing that interests me when I'm looking into a rivalry for the Indiana Pacers right now, especially for this season. Now, last year, obviously, the Miami Heat. Now, I see where you're coming from with the Miami Heat, but I've been to a couple Miami Heat games this year, and that place filling up dropped down tremendously. First of all, there was nobody into the game until it came down to the end. There was no beat the Heat chants. I felt like I was at a 76ers game when they were playing the Indianapolis Pacers. So
The Indiana Pacers?
yes, I just said Indianapolis
It
Pacers.
happens. It
Yes.
happens.
So I think that there's really no rivalry between the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers as of now. But
I completely disagree.
I bet you do. And hopefully, I love watching the Indiana Pacers play. I almost did it again.
No,
Indiana Pacers
you're
play.
referring to the game that you went to against the Heat where Paul George returned. And I don't know if you took a bathroom break or went to get a hot dog or what, Rhett, but when I was watching that game and Paul George came back in that place was packed. I heard Beat the Heat chants. It was great.
I did not.
environment.
There was not one time did I hear Beat the Heat chants. The only time I heard
because you were
fans
too far up.
No, I was club level. The only time I heard that place get just raring was when Paul George touched the ball and when he entered the game for the first time. Other than that, it wasn't chirpy. It wasn't. I mean, people were just sitting there. When we used to go to the Pacers versus Heat games, it was just insane. That place, you couldn't even think after you left that building.
And maybe a lot of that had to do with Lance Stevenson and his antics and his getting ejected. And as I'm sitting here watching a Vine video of Lance Stevenson pushing Dwayne Wade and then making the face like he's going to kill him, but and the crowd gets up. But okay, I agree with you. With LeBron leaving, it's not the same rivalry. But if you had to pick a rival right now, I think it's still the Miami Heat. They still have enough players on that team that the Pacers fans and players can't stand. And there's fights.
What I'm saying is I have a blank number one spot is that there's nobody at that level for a number one spot. I think a number two spot, would be the Miami Heat, but I don't think that there is a
Okay, well then
distinct...
who's up there then? If there's not one, so all of those teams I listed, would you put the Bulls and Heat that you could put either one there? What about the Knicks?
I would put, the Chicago Bulls, for the love of God. The Knicks, they're nothing right now.
They aren't. And see, so I agree.
No rivalry
Some
there.
of these are a part of the past.
Yeah.
The Knicks are still a rival, but not like they were in the past. And a lot of that stems from them not being as good, which is what I wanted to ask you. Do you think that part of being a big rival in your mind, does it mean that the team has to be very good and the games are that competitive
Yes.
anymore. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's not a rival.
Yes.
Because
And I think that's how the players feel.
yeah, the players may feel like that, but here's the thing about this. I don't necessarily agree with the team having to be as good because when you look at rivalries, the teams aren't always successful, but you still hate that team. Duke, North Carolina. Not every year North Carolina has a good team, but those two teams hate each other, and it might be arguably the greatest rivalry in all of sports. And they always will have fans. I mean, just chance always hating each other. Fights breaking out. Doesn't matter how bad the other team is. It's still their biggest rival.
Did you go to a New York Knicks game this year?
I didn't this year, but when I went to the one last year, sure, it may not feel like that, but I would still consider these teams rivals.
That might not feel like that because you could lay across the seats. Nobody's there.
Well, the Knicks game that I went to, there was plenty of fans there.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah.
So it's just I don't necessarily agree when you're talking rivals, the team doesn't have to be so good. You don't have to have Lance Stevenson, getting ejected and the crowd getting into. I think that enhances the rivalry, but I don't think that is what defines a rivalry. Rivalries are defined in the past and they're set as a foundation. The Knicks, foundation rivalry. The Bulls, a foundational rivalry. The Pistons, I would consider a foundational rivalry. The Cavs, not necessarily foundational rivalry. Maybe the Cavs will be one to come, depending on how long.
So.
LeBron, that's the next thing I was going to ask you is the Cavs, with LeBron being there and Kevin Love and Kyrie having their kind of new big three, assuming they stay together, I can see the Cavs becoming potentially maybe the Pacers' modern-day biggest rival. What do you think about that?
Well, let me finish up on the last topic first, on your whole situation about the rivalry. So here it is, like plain and simple.
Lay it out there.
For the Knicks, okay, especially if you got a team that is, with their record, nobody wants to show up for the games, and the place is just absolutely dead. You could drop popcorn and you could hear it. That makes it for none of the fans in the building get excited. I mean, how do you think the players feel on the court? I mean, there's not going to be no pushing, no shoving, no trash talking unless, it's a close game. That, I think that it has to be filled up, has to be trash talking. I know that Chicago Bulls games, there is trash talking, even with fans. But going to a Knicks game now, I don't see that. And like the Celtics, I would add one of the Celtics as being one of the rivalries. Going to the Celtics games I thought was always fun. And now that they are back, in my mind, they're on their way back onto a good season. I think that they could be added in there. But, Paul Pierce was one of the reasons why that rivalry, I think, was kind of created and it was made better. Him and Kevin Garnett, which I do not like. So,
well,
clear
we
that
can
up.
agree to disagree, and that's okay because, see, I think there are plenty of fans, especially maybe the older fans who lived and witnessed the great rivalries back in the 90s when Miller was here and all. I think that they will still want to go to a game against the Knicks, and they believe it is still a rival. They want to go get tickets to the Knicks-Pacers game because in their mind, nostalgia. Maybe you would be, but certain fans feel differently about certain games. I'm one of those fans. I want to go see a Knicks game because I believe it is a foundational rivalry that is exciting to watch. Anytime, even if you beat them by 20, you still beat your rival, and it's a great thing. The last Pacers game I went to against the Knicks, it came down to Carmelo taking the last-second shot. It was a good game. So it's one of those things where I just don't agree with you about you having to be good and necessarily the crowd being into it. I think that's what enhances a rivalry, but I don't think that's what defines a rivalry. So we can
agree to disagree on that one because, I think that we do have different opinions on that.
I know we do. And that's okay. So really quickly before we finish up here, then from your stance, do you think teams like the Pistons are rivalries of the past?
You know, I do think that is true, but I have watched a couple of Pistons games. I don't think the fans get into it, but the players sure do against each other. You know, they got Greg Monroe and Drummonds, and I think they're still a scrappy team. I think that's what enhances it too, is it scrappy teams, and that's what the Miami Heat were. They were little fighters and whiners. So I think that right there, but on the Cavs standpoint, I do believe that could end up being a rivalry, and that will be a rivalry that I will love. So I do hope the Cavs in this upcoming season start the foundation of being a rivalry. Well, because I sure do love beating LeBron.
I know you do. I guess we'll see with that. Maybe it will be. It will be exciting to see if it does. Let's transition into this next segment here, Rhett, and let's talk a little bit about if we think Indiana will get back to the top of the East next year. I want to start off with you. What do you think?
Well, I think that it's all dependent on Roy Hibbert's situation, but I'll give you two different standpoints on this.
Good, I love it.
If the Indiana Pacers keep Roy Hibbert, I think that they will end up being about a 4 spot because, you know, they have a lot of money put up into him. If he's going to be sitting on the bench, then that's gonna make the team not as deep. So I don't think that, you know, they're going to be past the Chicago Bulls or heck, the Washington Wizards or the Boston Celtics if they do anything in the offseason. So, and the Hawks, can't forget about them. And that's
the East is getting stronger.
Yeah. So I think that it's really dependent on if they move Roy Hibbert or heck, if he potentially gets better because, you know, it is contract year. So that should light a fire under his butt too. But on the standpoint, if they get rid of Roy Hibbert, I think that they could potentially have a great chance of being one of the probably the top 3 spot again. But, you know, they're going to have a lot of money freed up, $15 million to play with. And with the free agency stacked as the way it is, I think that they have a good shot of getting somebody good in the off season. But, you know, I would like to see Aldridge come.
Hey, I don't disagree with that. My statement goes like this. The Pacers get back to at least the 3 seed in the East if, 1, Paul George comes back and is the Paul George that is MVP-like. That is going to be my biggest key, is he healthy enough? Does he look like the old Paul George? That is the number 1 key for me. Number 2, regardless of if Hibbert stays or goes.
Should he stay or should he go?
Bum, 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 bum. Well, the second key, regardless of if Hibbert stays or goes, the Pacers have to get a big man that can come and contribute to this team. Whether that comes from the first round in the draft, like a Kaminsky, or...
He's really set on Kaminsky.
Whether that comes from a Kaminsky or they can get a big man free agent like a DeMarcus Aldridge, like you're talking about. LaMarcus Aldridge or a Marc Gasol, or I'll say it, a Kevin Love, but it won't happen because I think he's in Cleveland. But regardless, Greg Monroe, there's plenty of big man free agents that are a lot more contributable on offense than Roy Hibbert is, and that we could probably get for cheaper. So that is my second key, is that a big man comes in to replace Hibbert, either in the starting lineup or regardless, because I don't think, even if Hibbert's back, I don't think that he will start. So
Hope not.
Unless the Pacers just completely mess up and do not...
Or using that as a scare tactic to try and get him to not sign
Exactly, and it could be because, I don't know how it would work. But that's my key, is that a big man has to come in and contribute. If that happens and Paul George is back to his number one, this Pacers team will be at least a 3 seed. You can quote me for it. And there's some things to preface my stance here. Again, Paul George returned this season and looked pretty good. Not like him normal self, but pretty good, which is remarkable. Now he has a whole summer to get healthy. George Hill proved that when he is more of a shooting guard, he is a shooting guard, and a very productive one in the starting lineup. C.J. Miles proved to be a Reggie Miller from downtown. Rodney Stuckey was another valuable addition that the Pacers are looking to keep very productive. And then Solomon Hill, some of these other players off the bench, Scola, they had their moments. We mentioned Donald Sloan. Mahinmi, up and down year. I don't know about Mahinmi, but
shouldn't be signed back.
Right. And I kind of agree with that. But regardless, this team, they still have a good bench foundation. The starting lineup will be back in there. If they do good in the draft, if they get a big-name free agent, I think this Indiana Pacers team will be back on top in the East. And by that, meaning at least the 3 seed or higher. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. My number one is Roy Hibbert signing back, but my number 2 is, Paul George being back to his elite level. But, I think that with him even coming back and playing like he did this year, that's pretty good, but I mean, it wouldn't push them into a 3 spot. I think that they'd be playoff material, but I have total faith that he's going to be back and better than ever.
Yeah, and I do too, and I sure hope so, but because he is the fuel to the Pacers engine. But I will say this. Look at some of these teams, because it's worth mentioning these other teams that are top in the East have some big-time free agents coming up that may or may not be on the team if they can't sign them back. So teams can be altered here this offseason even. So the Hawks in the top in the East, will they keep some of their big-name free agents that are upcoming? Because that could change some things. And also, is this Hawks team for real, or was this just a fluke season? Because they haven't consistently proved. They literally came out of nowhere. So maybe, and they're still thriving in the playoffs right now. So maybe they are legit. But I'm not ready to give them the 1 seed again next year after this was their first year of turning their team around. So you've got that. The Cavaliers, we already mentioned. Kevin Love will be a free agent. LeBron James is a free agent. Obviously, I think it's probably 99.99% sure that they will both be signing back with Cleveland.
But you're saying there's a chance.
But you're saying there's a chance, and yes, I am. But no, I'm not. So the Cavaliers, I would expect them to be right up as the 1 or 2 seed in the East. The Chicago Bulls, again, I expect them to be, because I think they'll sign Butler back and they have Rose and Gasol.
Unfortunately.
They have a solid team, and they are built defensively just like the Pacers, that mindset of defense to offense, well coached. I think that team will be right there in the East. So really, it's Cavs, Bulls, Pacers is what I really predict. And then you look at other teams like the Raptors. They proved to kind of be overrated and really fell at the end of the year. The Wizards are proving to be a good team, but who will they have signed back?
Getting old.
And they are. They've got Beal and Wall, but aside from that, that's their core mainly. And so I don't know if maybe they will be as successful again. I'd maybe put them at the 4 seed. Okay, you got the Bucks, much improved this year.
I think they could be up there.
They'll probably be up there. I'd maybe keep them right about where they are at the 6th seed.
Can't forget about the Celtics.
The Celtics in 7. The Celtics, I think, I agree with you, they're an improving team.
I would put them as probably a 5.
Yeah, see, I don't know if I'm going to go as high as you are in that. I might put them at the 6th seed.
Fantastic coach.
Swap them around with the Bucks. Yes, he is. So they're on the rise. Who will they keep? That will be the key there. And then the 8th seed was the Nets. The Nets, I feel like, are one of the most disappointing franchises in NBA history because they have a ton of money and they get these big players and they try and get their big three of their own and they just can't get it done.
Amen.
They're inconsistent and they have some solid players, so that team might be broken up. I don't know. They're getting older as well. They can't stay healthy, so I don't know about that team. I don't even know if I would have them making the playoffs because I would maybe bring the Heat into the 8th seed instead of them. So I just don't see them being consistent. And then, it's interesting. There's a lot of other teams that I think, depending on what happens here in the offseason, that might make some noise. The Pistons are an up-and-coming young team. Depending on what happens with those free agents, we will see. The Knicks, down there at the very bottom, I don't think that they're going to improve much.
I think Phil.
So I certainly don't think that they will make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll finish at the bottom again. But I don't think that they will make the playoffs. I don't think that unless they do something miraculous in the offseason, I don't see it happening.
I got some faith in Phil.
No.
Phil.
No, Phil. He's for our rival organization now. I will deal with that. So the Sixers, the poor Sixers, will probably finish dead last in the East. They have some young players, but they just have not proven to be able to build a team and to get the right players in there and to win enough games. I don't think that they will improve much into the East there. The Magic have a good young team. The Magic, I think, can make a little bit of noise, probably not to playoff level, but depending on what maybe they can do in the offseason, that team is on the rise. And then the Charlotte Hornets. Interesting team there.
Up and down.
Cody Zeller, Lance Stevenson. There's a lot free agents there. Al Jefferson that may leave. That team, I think, will actually decline because I think players will be leaving. What do you think there with some of those teams, Rhett, in the East?
Well, I feel like they won't have Lance Stevenson next year.
Will
He'll
the
be
Pacers?
back in a number.
Spoiler? Hopeful?
It's not like I have an insight or anything, but wink, wink.
Exactly.
Sure hope so. But there's a ton of good teams out there that are going to be able to make some noise, and I think that the Magic could be a team that could end up surprising people.
Right.
So.
And I definitely think that they could. They could. It will be interesting to see how it plays out there, but that's my biggest keys were Paul George and the big man situation in the offseason here for the Pacers, and I will predict at least the top 3 for Indiana. I definitely see that happening. So the fans get back into it, come to the games, support this team, not just when it comes to playoff time.
Yeah,
get there
last year.
Or the best games. Get there. Tickets are very reasonable, so support this team because that's also a factor in becoming one of the best teams is you need your home court advantage. You need your fans backing you.
Like the Warriors.
Every game, exactly. So I think that is also going to be a key, but that's my prediction. Rhett, you've got your prediction. We will see what happens. We can only hope as Pacers fans that they will get back up there and certainly not miss out on the playoffs again because we are not used to that.
I don't like it.
I don't either. But we're having a good time. We can still talk Pacers. So Let's get into this last segment here, Rhett. This will be a juicy one. I know you've been looking forward to this one. I want your top 5 most memorable Pacers game finishes. But before that, we stumbled upon something that is pretty entertaining to listen to. So I hope you enjoy it. Take a listen.
For the next 2 games, the scene shifted to Indiana. On their home court, the Pacers would win Game 3 behind their tireless guard, Reggie Miller.
Lead pass ahead for Mark Jackson. This is what Indiana wants. They run to Miller for 3. Got it.
Game 4, the Bulls led by a point in the final seconds when Miller and Jordan would square off again.
Here we go. McGee holding, looking. Here comes Miller to the top. Miller a catch. Miller a look. He hit it. Reggie Miller knocked it down. 4/10 of a second left. Tony out near the timeline. Looking. Got it to Michael.
Wow, Rhett, I got to tell you, this kind of transitions into my top 5 most memorable
it does mine too.
Game finishes. I'll be curious to see where this one ranks on yours. I do. Let's go. Let's do it like this. I want to count down from 5 to 1. So give me.
That's what I was planning on.
Give me your number 5, and I'll give you mine.
All right. Well, first of all, this one. It's kind of a depressing one, but, you know, it is still one of my top 5 most memorable moments. You know, as me actually seeing it in real life, it was a doozy, especially for me, and that is PG battling LeBron James in the conference finals, knocking down that long three. But they did end up losing in that game. But the fight of that team, it was incredible. They were both going back and forth. It still will more than likely be my favorite rival of all time, the Pacers and Heat. But that was one of my favorite games to watch. What about you?
Well, I agree. That was such a good game. The only issue I have is that the Pacers
bouncing up and down.
It was incredible. So I would put that as a top clutch shot. But game finishes, I can't do it as the most memorable because they lost the game.
Yeah, but it's still memorable in my mind. That's where I'm going with there.
So that's where you're going with it because it's memorable in your mind.
Yes.
Hey, that's okay. It happens. Well, I'm going to go with the last year's conference finals game against the Heat at home, 107-96, Pacers win. It was just I had to put a Heat game. It wasn't one of those where it was right down to the wire. But the Pacers pulled away late. It was one of those games where I had to put a Miami Heat Pacers game because every single one of these games were so memorable. I literally can remember almost every one, and we went to a lot of these games.
Yes.
And we wanted to go
to
one
broke.
In South Beach. Exactly. But
yeah. The
Pacers played great in this game, and it was just despite LeBron having 25 and 10, despite Dwayne Wade having 27, and Chris Anderson having 14, and Ray Allen having 12, the Pacers played overall great team basketball. Paul George had a great game. This was just a memorable win. At home, it was a gold out. They dominated. It was just one of those where we went to the game, Rhett, and we sure felt it because you got that gold out. You had the Beat the Heat signs. It was loud the whole game. Pacers
painted.
Led this whole game. That has to be my number 5. I've got to put that great win at home in the gold out.
It's good. That was a good one.
Absolutely.
That was a good one.
All right. So that was my number 5 from last year. Give me your number 4.
All right. Well, this one's not, as big, but it was a fantastic game, I believe. The Indiana Pacers playing Sacramento in 2013-2014 season. Paul George having 36 points, hitting a 3, and got fouled and sent it into overtime where the Pacers took care of the business. And that to me was just a fantastic game. I actually remember on the phone with you during that shot, before it happened, I thought I was going to streak through my neighborhood. And
Did you now?
yes, and it was just a fantastic game. It was a good one. They came back and ended up taking care of business.
They really did. I love it. I think that's great, Rhett. I do. So I'm gonna go in a little bit of a different direction for my number 4. And it is a little bit of a throwback, but this was a game in 2000 on June 2nd at New York, and this was a great game because they finally got the monkey off their back and they went to the NBA Finals by beating their rival Knicks. After so many years of frustration, against that Knicks team in those great games, they finally got past them. Now they ended up losing in the finals to the Lakers, but it was Reggie's closest to getting that ring, and he got past the Knicks, and it was also so significant because that was the last season that the Knicks were really relevant, because they traded Patrick Ewing after that, and that team just fell apart. But it was truly a great game and a great finish for the Pacers, and it got them to that next level, that hump, over the hump to get to the finals. So I've got to put that game in there as number 4. So, Rhett, I want to hear your number 3, as we're down to the top 3, and these really get interesting.
All right. Well, mine would be May 29th, 1995. Rick Smits hits a last-second jumper, dubbed the Memorial Day Miracle, caps an astonishing back-and-forth finish as the Pacers stun Orlando 94-93 to win Game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals. That, you have to throw Rick Smits in there. He was a great player. Great player for the Indiana Pacers. And what a great shot. What a great shot to win the game.
It was one of the Pacer greats. I don't disagree. I'm pretty close. I'm on your level, Rhett. You're throwing out some other good games. I'm throwing out some different games, a little throwback. That's okay.
I think our next two is going to be pretty similar.
I have a feeling they will, but here's my number 3. It was Game 5, June 1st, 1994. Pacers at Knicks. Reggie Miller could not hit a shot for the first half and going into the third quarter. And Spike Lee decided that he would try and get under Reggie Miller's skin and laugh a little, brag a little, talk a little trash. It didn't work out so well, because Reggie Miller, being the great legend that he was, got a little hot. And he dropped 25 in the fourth quarter, while they ended up taking that series. And the infamous choking sign, the symbol that he gave Spike Lee and then went on to grab his crotch, it's one of the most memorable scenes where he literally was his motivation. He couldn't miss a shot, Rhett.
Now I'm feeling like an idiot.
He was shooting them from half court. It was unbelievable. You can't think of Pacers' great game finishes without this one. Reggie Miller might have had the most hot end of a game that any player has, and it was at Madison Square Garden, which made it even better. And every time he would hit a shot, he'd get more and more motivated to give a gesture to Spike Lee, his other rival. Great
Fans ended up hating him after that game.
He did. Number 3 on my list.
I can't believe I forgot to put that in my list.
I can't either.
That is, oh my goodness.
That's a fail. So he's gonna choose the Sacramento Kings game over that. I forgive you, Red. I forgive you. I put it in there. So it is
There
a
you go.
top
Thank
5.
you. Thank you. I
You're
agree.
welcome. It is a top 5 finish for sure. Let's get to the final 2, Red.
I like to have some present and some old ones in there. That's what I was doing there.
Right. Of course.
All right. So
give me your number 2.
All right. May 25th, 1998. Reggie Miller beats Michael Jordan, a game winner 3-pointer as the Pacers beat the Bulls 96-94 to tie the Eastern Conference Finals at 2-2. What an incredible shot.
We agree. Hey.
Yes. He gave him a nice little nudge right as he was coming up for the ball. What
did.
A great. First of all, that would have been a offensive foul. Now, really, that would have been an offensive foul now in today's game. But what an incredible shot!
He got away with it, and hey,
especially on Jordan,
the audio on the greatest of all time. Hey, he got it. This is where it made it on our list. That the audio that you heard, we told you it was going to be up there. We're going to get to it later. Yeah, it's number 2 on the top 5 greatest Pacers finishes. Reggie Miller coming off of those double screens, giving a little nudge, a little shove to Michael Jordan, and he fades away, and like he has done time and time before, swishes a clutch 3 to put the Pacers up. Now, the Pacers almost lost that game because Michael Jordan darn near hit that shot with 4/10 of a second left.
But he played great defense on that.
He did.
Michael Jordan, on that last shot, he adjusted incredibly. I can't believe, first of all, that's just a tough shot in general, but oh my, he almost got it to fall. And that's just Michael Jordan at his self. He can make big time shots, but it was just one of those times when it did not fall that time.
No, and Reggie Miller made the big time shot and stole the spotlight. And what made it even better is I'm sure everyone who knows of Reggie Miller and the big Pacers fan can picture this scene. Reggie Miller jumping up and down, spinning around, looking like an animal out there, the circus.
Oh, yeah.
Having a great time. Couldn't believe it himself. He hit it. It was surreal. And the crowd went crazy. And the best part about it is you heard the crowd chanting, Reggie, Reggie, Reggie. And every time I hear that chant, I get cold chills. Reggie Miller, unbelievable game. Number 2 on both of our lists. And I am sure of it, Rhett, that we both agree with what our number 1 is.
Yeah, I will start out with this one.
I sure hope so. What is it?
All right, it is Paul George making...
No!
I'm kidding.
Oh,
It is...
You almost had it. You almost had me.
All right, it is May 7th, 1995. Reggie scores 8 points in the final 8.9 seconds in the Rock the Garden and shock the Knicks 107-105 in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals.
One-of-a-time accomplishments. Still
What?
talked about today. Still remembered. Reggie Miller in that game in 1995 stole Game 1. 8 points in 16 seconds. Unbelievable. The fans thought the game was over. But Reggie
What
didn't.
did you say? Did you say 8 points in 16 seconds?
Yeah, because there were 16 seconds left. They call it the 8 points in 9 seconds, but really it was scored over that because when he hit his 2 free throws, the time had run out. There was 16 seconds left in the game, but how he scored them in his time was the 8 and 9 seconds. It was incredible. This game, Reggie Miller, clutch as can be, down by 6, knows he has to get a quick 3, so he's just tells his teammates, all right, just get me open. I'm going to hit it. Then we got to steal the ball. Comes off the screen. Boom, baby. Down by 3. And Reggie, the steal. He retreats to the three-point line and hits again. Reggie stole the ball, hit another 3, tied the game up. Pretty soon, all of the idiot fans that left are like, oh my gosh, the game's tied. I can't get back in to Madison Square Garden. Yeah, Reggie just did that. Just tied the game like that. And then what makes it even better is John Starks chokes with 2 free throws because he is thinking about what Reggie Miller just did, is in disbelief, and he gives his famous quote, "Did this dude just did this?" And it makes me crack up every time. But yes, he did just do this, and he missed free throws, and then they foul Reggie Miller, of all players, the 90% career free throw shooter who never misses a free throw. Clutch as can be, could have made him with his eyes closed. There's his 8 points. Pacers win by 2. Game over. Number 1 of the greatest Pacers finishes of all times, Reggie Miller. What a great game in that series back in 95 at New York. Rhett, we went through the top 5. We agreed on most of them. You left one out, very disrespectful, but I covered your back.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a little disrespectful.
It was, but hey, no problem.
That's one of my favorite moments, too.
Hey,
Can't believe I left that one out.
It's okay. It happens to all of us, Rhett. Regardless, it was a great show. A lot of great Pacers finishes, no doubt. So that's all we have for this one. Next week, we'll have some more interesting elements, some good segments to talk about, so please stay tuned. To recap what was talked about on the show, we discussed the Pacers' latest offseason news. We answered the question, who is the Pacers' biggest rival now? We talked about if we think Indiana will get back to the top of the East next year, and we discussed the Pacers' top 5 most memorable game finishes. That is all that we have for tonight. Thank you for tuning into the show. Feel free to leave any comments. Tweet and retweet the show at Kyle M. Newman and at Rhett Hensley. We will be back at it next Wednesday at 8 Eastern Time. I'm Kyle Newman.
And I'm Rhett Hensley.
Have a good night, and go Pacers!
Go Pacers.